My name is Jon Carmichael. I am an astrophotographer. Any moment during an eclipse until totality is just as bright as if it's broad daylight. So you always have to keep that in mind. Even when it's at 99%, it's very tempting for people to want to look at that. Even they think squinting their eyes is okay, but it's not. You really have to realize that all the sunlight that you're seeing is just as damaging to your eyes at any phase until totality. And then when it comes to camera equipment, you have to treat that just like your eyes, because cameras work the exact same way as our eyeballs. Be aware of the sensor of your camera, and any kind of camera. It doesn't matter if it's an DSLR camera like this, doesn't matter if it's a mirrorless, doesn't matter if it's your phone. All cameras have a sensor, and the sensors work very similarly to the retina, the back of your eyeballs. The most important thing is to remind yourself that your phone is still a camera, and all cameras have a sensor, and the sensor behaves just like our eyeballs. So if you're constantly just pointing your phone camera up at the sun directly, you are damaging your phone's camera. And these are not cheap anymore, as we all know. So you want to protect your camera phone as much as possible. So there's a lot of really affordable options, such as this. Most importantly, it has a solar filter to put over the camera, all three lenses on this particular phone. I would recommend, to be honest, to get a tripod, have your phone set up, kind of get all the settings right ahead of time, so that when the eclipse actually happens, you can actually just enjoy yourself. So there's going to be literally millions of photos of the eclipse out there. I know how tempting it is to capture it with your phone, or even try to use your phone as a way to look at the eclipse closer by zooming it in. But again, only do so with one of these filters. If you put it on a tripod and you just kind of can enjoy the moment, you will never regret that. If you can't find one of these filters specifically for phone, which it attaches with Velcro, you can just take your Eclipse glasses and put that over the camera. It works the same way. If you're not using a phone and you actually want to invest, or you already have a DSLR camera like this, or a mirrorless camera, you have to apply the same principles. You have to really protect the sensor on the back of your camera. So what I see a lot of people doing, you turn on the live view here and you point it up toward the sky. You want to get as much detail of the eclipse as possible using your camera. The problem is, if you can see on a screen what your camera is pointing at, that means all of this is getting exposed to your sensor. You constantly want to keep that in mind, assuming that you want to save your camera life and not destroy your poor sensor, because over time you'll start getting dead pixels if you ruin it. And also, remember, if you're using a telephoto lens like this that zooms in a ton, that just magnifies the intensity that much more. We all, as kids, we used a magnifying glass, to burn a leaf on the sidewalk or whatever. That's kind of what's happening here. The biggest thing is to never, ever, ever look through the viewfinder, because when you turn the live view off, if it's not a mirrorless, meaning if it's a DSLR camera, there's actually multiple mirrors angled. So whatever you're seeing through the eye finder itself, the mirrors are you're actually seeing directly through the lens itself. So if you point the camera up directly to the sun and you're looking through the viewfinder here, that is like instant damage to the eye. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do. So if you're going to do that, I just recommend from the very get-go getting proper filters, solar filters, to block that out. If you can't find an actual solar rated filter, or if you want to save some money and you already have some ND filters, just be sure you stack ND filters on top of one another to amount to at least 16 stops. That's what's recommended. You can stack as many as you like, pop that on the lens, and then you're good to go. Then it's safe to actually use the camera in these other ways. But if you don't have a filter on these things, do not attempt that. Otherwise, it'll be very expensive and potentially damaging to the eye. It's all a matter of knowing how to adjust for low light, especially during an eclipse. It'll be broad daylight, and in seconds, it's suddenly dark, like midnight. So you have to be ready for that because you don't have a lot of time to make those adjustments. So what I recommend is to prepare ahead of time, start practicing. You know, you can get everything dialed in. A lot of SLR cameras have these custom buttons. So on the top of the camera here, C1, C2, C3, if you have those custom settings, get it all dialed in and then register that as custom 1. So that during that phase of the eclipse, you're ready. You've got custom 1, you've got the white balance set, the aperture, the ISO, the shutter speed, all of that good stuff. So that way you're not scrambling, you're not trying to get it all right when this is probably a once in a lifetime moment to experience. You don't want to waste that by focusing on all the camera settings and learning as you go in the moment. You really want to prepare ahead of time. And as far as focusing goes, I personally recommend using manual focus. That way when the focus is set, just don't touch this and you're good to go for all your shots. But when you do manually focus, I highly recommend turning on your live view. What's cool about this is you can digitally zoom in and then adjust here. See, now and then you could zoom in even more, 10 times zoom. And you just go back and forth a bit until it's the absolute sharpness. There. Now you are perfectly focused for that spot on that mountain. Oh, and ISO, by the way, you want to keep that as low as possible because you don't want to have too much noise, which is kind of the grainy look you get in photos. But in totality, it's pretty dark. So depending on what kind of lens you have, if you have a fast lens, meaning you can have a wide aperture, you know, a good number is maybe 2.8. Really good is like 1.2 or 1.4 is a really wide aperture. The wider the aperture, the more light it lets in. The more light it lets in, the less ISO you can get away with. The white balance, I think that's really overlooked by most photographers. Most people just keep white balance on auto white balance, which is AWB on most cameras. White balance is basically you telling the camera what white is, because our brains automatically do it. You know, if we're in a really cool scene like this, it's all shaded, it's a lot more blue. If it was really sunny out right now, it'd be a lot more yellow. And our brains adjust for that. But our cameras try to adjust for that, but it's not usually very good. Also, if you have auto setting, any kind of auto settings, every single shot is going to be different. So when you go back into post and you looking through all the images on your computer, you're going to be pulling your hair out because you can't just batch process everything, because every single shot's going to be a different setting because your camera's making those decisions for you instead of yourself. I hope this was helpful for everybody, and I really hope you have a good time shooting the eclipse, and remember to be present, enjoy the moment, don't get too focused on the photography. I know that's weird coming from me, but you won't regret just being present and enjoying the moment.